I want to first ask Annette, are we missing anybody?
I think, okay, there we go. I think what we can do is, if it's possible, just to ask our subcommittee members to identify their presence so we can ensure that they have their cameras on as well. Omar,
Hi, this is Omar Martinez.
okay. And then I think I heard Isela, right?
Yes, good morning, Gisela Dagnino.
Morning, Isela.
Okay. Do we have any other subcommittee member?
Sorry, this is Delbert. I didn't catch the question. I just got in the audio.
Okay, Delbert, is there any way that you can get your get your camera on? I know you said audio, but can you get on through a computer or a smartphone?
Yeah.
Thank you. And just to be sure, I'm just going to identify one more time who we have on this committee. So we have, I know that Jeff Bennett was not going to be able to join us, but we also have Levi. And so Levi's the only other one missing. So let me see here. We've got right now we have Delbert, Isela, Omar, and Sal. So if Delbert, if you can get once you get yours on, then we can get started, because I just want to make sure we have everybody on screen.
My camera is on.
Your camera's on? It's not showing up on our side.
Are you on two devices?
I dialed in with my phone, but I'm using the computer for video. So my computer microphone doesn't work well.
Okay, well, the computers, we don't see that. Is it that could be that number 11, but that doesn't have a camera. Your camera button on?
Yes, I can see me on the screen. So
Might want to let him in.
Well, oh, we don't even have a pass. We're letting everybody, as soon as they join, they can get in.
Okay.
Maybe it's just on our side. Those of you that are participating virtually, can anybody see Dilbert's face?
it won't be on the same circle as the phone, right? It's a separate video icon.
Delbert's video is on. I see him.
Okay. I'm so sorry, Delbert. I didn't see.
It happens to me all the time. I'm easily able to.
Okay, if they can see him, then we should be.
All right, sorry about that. We're good then.
All right. Well, again, welcome everybody. This is the second meeting for subcommittee number 3. And I believe Annette wanted to ask to move up item number 4 to the front.
Yes, if it's possible, I would like to go ahead and just take care of the minutes and get that out of the way. These are the minutes that we had for the previous meeting. And so wanted to see if anybody had any questions or concerns with the document that needed to be revised. If not, I would ask through the chair if we could have someone make a motion to approve the minutes.
Yes, we could entertain a motion if y'all in agreement to move item number 4 to the forefront.
Move to approve.
Hear a motion. Okay, who did the second?
Let me interject on the minutes. I'm seeing that the hyperlink, this is supposed to be for a task. This subcommittee is subcommittee 3, 4B, and the hyperlink is linking to minutes from Subcommittee 1 on Task 3A, 3B.
Okay.
Is that
No.
proper?
That should not be the case. What we can do is, let's go ahead and just stay with the schedule on the agenda, and I'll go ahead and get those corrected and send them out right now.
Well, we had a motion in a second.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to do that motion.
Isela, will you want to rescind your motion?
Yes, it was to move it to the forefront, right? So I guess we'll move to leave it as shown on the agenda.
Okay. No longer motion. Okay, let's move on. You want to go ahead, Annette, with item number 1, present that?
Yes, okay, so what we have for agenda item, I'm just pulling this up real quick. See here. Okay, so what I would like to do is just, we can go ahead and move on to number 2 because we've already identified who's present. In addition to our subcommittee members, there are other folks from the AECOM team, as well as some from the public. But we can go ahead and move on to number 2, and I believe that Brian's going to go ahead and cover the items 2 and 3 from this point on. Brian?
Actually, I believe Chris Wright will be presenting.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, okay. So welcome, everyone. Let me just share my screen.
We'll have to table that and bring the next one so we have that.
All right. So this is the agenda of what we're trying to get through today. We're going to talk about the objective. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like this is wrong presentation. Okay, here's the agenda. So we're going to talk about some of the recent progress related to the last subcommittee meeting, and that last subcommittee meeting was focused on the Rio Grande. This meeting is not focused on the Rio Grande, although there may be some issues that come up related to it. We're going to talk about a potential FME with communities at risk of flooding where there's outdated or very or maybe lacking floodplain information or floodplain maps altogether. We'll talk a little bit about EPC WID number 1's issues related to flooding, and we will go through some of the issues that were brought up by Jeff Bennett at the last subcommittee 2 meeting concerning environmental flows and floodplain connectivity and ASR. We'll also talk about, then we'll kind of shift gears actually. At that point, we want to open it up and have more of a discussion and hear from you all that were present during some recent historic flood events such as 2006 in El Paso or 2021. And we're going to try to track what happened from your experiences, how can we improve it, how can we improve communication, see if there's a study or a strategy that needs to be done so that in the future, if there's an event, we can be prepared, more prepared. And then we'll open it up to any other topics that any subcommittees want to, any subcommittee members or members of the public want to bring up. And lastly, we'll wrap up by covering 2 tentative future meeting dates. So the goals of this meeting are twofold. One is we want to talk a little bit about the process for selecting FMEs and FMSs. That's something that's going to need to be voted on at the next subcommittee meeting so that we can bring it to the general flood planning group for a vote by November 15th, which would be our 30 days prior to the November 30th flood planning group meeting. And that's a big deadline for us because we would like to get that process approved for our tech memo. So that's one goal. The second goal is to learn more about some of the important flood issues in El Paso and the rest of the region. We're going to focus a little bit on some of the storm events in El Paso today, because that's one of the most populated areas, but we will be talking about issues from all over the region. And while we're talking about these issues and discussing FMEs and FMSs, we want to be thinking about the process that we're using to select the group of strategies and studies that we're going to be evaluating in more detail as part of the plan. So does that make sense? We have two goals. One is to establish a basic process, and two is to be learning about the issues from listening to all of you and kind of noticing what is our process here, because we're going to have to document that and vote on it at the next meeting. Any questions about the goals? Okay. So now, just to recap quickly some of the recent progress concerning the previous Subcommittee 3 meeting. We did have a positive vote on establishing an FME concerning the Rio Grande H&H modeling. We also discussed a modeling approach for a potential FMS that would, an example of a FMS is the levee accreditation throughout along the Rio Grande, and we came up with a modeling approach that would be implemented if that were a strategy that we move forward with, which in likelihood it's a pretty important issue. Coordination, there was a call with Fathom that I had since our last call, and that helped to clarify some of their levee assumptions. And that's gonna help us if we need to come up with interior drainage downstream of El Paso County. If we have any levee accreditation strategies downstream of El Paso County, we may need to use a Fathom, because that's the best available data in a lot of parts of the region outside of El Paso County. We also just got an email recently from TWDB that confirmed that the Fathom data set, which is referred to as a cursory floodplain data set, is expected to be available at the end of October. So that's good news. That's the refined version of the Fathom data set. There is an initial version that's ready right now. We are coordinating with Texas Water Development Board, and I know that I owe you a response. Richard, you had reached out about some available times and dates for a meeting next week. And we had, just to back up a little bit, we discussed some issues related to the Mexico side levees and also overtopping of levees, which we submitted in a Word document with several questions, detailed questions. And Richard confirmed that TWDB will be responding in email or in written format, but they are also available for a meeting. And so, Jeff, I think we're just waiting to confirm that you can be there. We will follow up after this email, but we got some times from Dr. Bora at USIBWC, and I shot you those times in an email, Jeff. So if we could just get back to Richard later today with a meeting date. We want to go ahead and get that set up for next week. USIBWC, we had requested their best available model downstream of American Dam. They have provided that, so thank you, USIBWC. We are still in the process of reviewing that. We have also requested some gauge data at Elephant Butte Irrigation District, at Elephant Butte Dam and Caballo Dam, and along some parts of the Rio Grande. So we've received that gauge data, and that's also under review. So those are all the items related to our last subcommittee meeting. Any questions there before we move on? All right. So now we're just going to talk about some potential FMEs and FMSs. There's some new folks on the call that may not have been at the last subcommittee or even any of the general flood planning group meetings, and so I just wanted to just quickly show what an FME and FMS is, and I just have a FMP, which is a project, which there's a different subcommittee that's focused on the projects, but basically an FME is a study. If there needs to be a study before we can accurately define the number of houses at risk, for example, or the need for a particular project. If we don't have enough information, then we will propose a study or a flood management evaluation. For simplistic purposes, we're just going to refer to that as a study on this call. So we're talking about FMEs. A strategy is a plan that may or may not involve projects or FMPs. A strategy might have recurring maintenance costs, for example, recurring costs, whereas a project has a one-time cost. And a strategy can involve multiple plans to address, a bigger issue that might not be able to be fixed with just a project. For this purposes of this call, we're just going to refer to those as strategies, but we're talking about flood management strategies, FMSs. Any questions? All right,
No,
y'all feel free. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Gabe Duran. I'm having a little bit of trouble with Teams, but I'm on the phone here.
Hey, Gabe, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm trying to get on Teams right now, but I'll listen in. And when you want to address me, just let me know.
Okay, no problem. All right, so first of all, we again want to go back to this process. Like I said, we want to be thinking about the process that we're using to select an FME or an FMS. And I'm going to use an example here of an important one that I think is pretty clear. We'll probably need one related to the counties where we don't have FEMA floodplain data, which there are 4 within our region. Now, I'm just going to walk through the steps that we're going to use to select where we might need a study out of these 4 counties, because as part of this regional plan, we're not just going to study all 4 counties just because they don't have floodplains. We're going to focus on the areas that are most populated. And so here's how we do that. The process to identify or screen out these FMEs in these areas that don't have mapping, we'll first look at where are the communities, where are their structures or buildings at risk, potentially at risk. We don't know that they're at risk at this point because they don't have mapping, right? So how do we find out if they're at risk? How do we zoom in on the areas where we do need to do a study, which will eventually lead to a project or an FMS? Well, after we look at where are the communities, we look at, do these communities have critical facilities within them? Do they have agricultural or farmland? Do they have major roads? Then we look at our best available flood maps, which will be either Fathom or the FAFDS, which are FEMA floodplains that are basically, they're not digital firms. They're very approximate, and they don't have depth grids associated with them. But in these 4 counties, we know that we don't even have FAFDS. We just have Fathom. So that's going to be our best source to see, okay, based on the approximate, or cursory floodplain data from Fathom, are there houses, communities, structures at risk within those floodplains? And we need to identify, well, how many groups, if there's a cluster of houses in a floodplain, how big is that cluster? And do we look at just the 100-year or do we look at the 500-year? Do we look at just existing conditions, or do we look at future conditions, which means future impervious cover or maybe the consideration of climate change? Now, I'm going to open that up to the group and ask right now, are we interested in looking at just the 100-year, or does anybody have any strong feelings about looking at the 500-year?
I'd like to stick with at least for the rural areas outside of the city of Presidio, because that's the one that's most impacted by 100-year events. I'd like to stick with 100-year. Pretty much everywhere else, I think it's sufficient. Where I do think we need a closer look is in Presidio, the city of Presidio.
So you think even in Presidio, the 100 years is sufficient, or are you saying that maybe we need to consider the 500-year in Presidio?
Yes, maybe 500-year might be what we're doing it, but if you're able to, well, I guess, 500-year would be the standard I would follow for Presidio because how irregular Presidio is.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? It sounds, because we're going to be mapping the 100-year and the 500-year as part of the existing flood risk, but when we're selecting studies and strategies, Omar's proposing that we focus on the 100-year only, except in Presidio. We might want to consider the 500-year. Anybody have any comments on that?
So I know we mapped the 100 and the 500, but whenever we build projects, we usually do it to the 100 because it's cost prohibitive to do 500. So what would be the point of including the 500 on FMPs?
I agree with you on that one.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you repeat that? Was that you, Omar?
That was me, Sal. I'm agreeing with Acela on that. For the most practical reason, we designed based on a 100. I don't see the point of going into the 500.
One of the reasons why I think Presidio needs a little bit beyond 100 is because they do have localized storm events that not very many people keep track of, but conversations there with the engineers there do say that they probably exceeded 100-year events. And so because it's right next to two rivers, I think, and one river we have very limited, the Conchas we have very limited data on, I do think it's due diligence to go a little bit beyond what normal standards would be for areas around, for everywhere else. Again, Presidio is such a weird place, and that's why that's the only area that I'm really proposing for us to go beyond the 100-year.
My only concern with that, Omar, is that the projects do get very pricey. So, I mean, in any, if we get grants, if Presidio gets grants, are they going to be able to come up with the matching funds? I mean, and that's an issue that every utility faces, right? Are we going to be able to come up with the matching funds, whether it's Presidio, whether it's El Paso, whether it's whomever it is? So that's my only concern, because we may have the projects listed, but if we can't come up with the matching funds, then it's really never going to get built. So I mean, that's just food for thought. I don't know if anybody else feels differently. I mean, we do want to protect all the communities to the max, but we also have to think about the feasibility of building these projects.
Is there any adverse effect in identifying resources at the 500-year level for Presidio? I know my understanding is that we're going to do both 100-year for Presidio and then 500-year. Is there anything other than, planning money? Can you tell me if there's any negative impact on them?
Oh, we will be mapping the 100-year and the 500-year as part of our existing flood risk. We're planning, we definitely have to do the 100-year when we're thinking about strategies and projects. The 500-year, my understanding is that that's not required, but you brought up a good point about the two rivers being in that region. and maybe something that is a little bit more robust than just the 100-year for both. If there are citizens that say that there are flooding events more than the greater or bigger flooding events than just the 100-year that they've experienced, maybe we need to look at some sort of coincidence analysis and see, well, what's the likelihood of flood coming down both rivers at the same time versus one of each of those, and that might, depending on that study, we might find that, well, it's really unlikely that both would have a peak at the same time. So maybe, it doesn't need to be designed for that level of flooding. But if we find that they do have a high likelihood of both coming and peaking at the same time, then maybe we do need to plan for that event. And maybe we need to do a project or a strategy that deals with coincident flooding. And maybe that's 2 100-year events, which could be significant, a very significant storm, but maybe it's not the 500-year.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'll leave it up to you all. You all are the experts. Whatever you think is best, but whatever allows us to give Presidio a second look on the fact, because their situation's pretty unique.
I agree. I think it's
Hey Chris, this is Apurva Bora from USIBWC. So,
yes.
Because Presidio is a rural area, and based on 2008 flooding, those levees on both sides, Presidio as well as Ojinaga. So those levees were built for 25-year storm plus 4 feet of freeboard. So anytime we build any higher levee, so we have to prove to Mexico that we are not deflecting water towards Mexico based on 1970 boundary treaty. Yeah, we can analyze 100-year or 500-year, but once you build a project, so we have to show to Mexico that we don't deflect water towards Mexico, because their levee will be only 25-year plus 4 feet of freeboard.
Wow.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Bora. Yeah, that's a good point. Is right now the levees, like you said, for the 25-year. So any types of projects where we're raising levees or a potential strategy that might involve that, we of course going to have to consider what happens on the Mexico side, which is part of the questions that we submitted to TWDB. So, well,
yes,
we want to.
This is Gabe with, I'm retired from IBWC, but I worked the flood of 2008, and this is just after Commissioner Marin's death. I was sent down there and recommended that a method be implemented much like we use in the lower Rio Grande Valley. It's called the PALM method, where the reservoirs are analyzed for potential releases in accordance to what is contributing to the main stem of the Rio Conchos. And this is a method where the releases are steadily opened, or the gates are steadily opened to avert a problem in Presidio. So the PALM method, in my opinion, would be a very useful tool to use on the Rio Conchos, because in 2008, Mexico just opened the gates to Luis Leon when they were in a flood situation, and that contributed greatly to the flooding in Presidio. Just pretty much wiped out all the levees downstream of Presidio, and IBWC brought in all our crews from our different projects along the Rio Grande. I think we had like 50 men, and we placed 2 miles of plastic on the levees and set around 20,000 sandbags with the help of Texas and the EOC of Texas. So Presidio is in my experience, is a very special case, like has been mentioned. Of course, there are 2 rivers, but mostly one river or the other will bring in the big water, and not at the same time, because this is a very huge river system in the Rio Conchos and in Rio Grande. So the palm method, and if you don't know about it, it's the method that IBWC uses to regulate the reservoirs of Falcon and Amistad. And it's proven to be very successful. And of course, implementing the palm method in Mexico would require IBWC to do a lot of coordination with Mexico. So this type of system can be placed for the Presidio project. And Presidio is located in a very mountainous area, and the flows are rapid and quick. So all this has to be taken into account. And of course, the limited amount of footprint for levees that we have in Presidio would be a major factor in raising levees. And of course, as Dr. Borra mentioned, Mexico would be looking at whether whatever we do in the United States impacts flooding in Mexico. Did you all get that?
Thank you, Gabe. Yeah, we did. I think that makes sense. And just so I understand, is that pond is in like across the pond, or is it palm as in a palm tree?
Palm, yeah, P-A-L-M.
P-A-L-M, okay.
Yeah, this method was developed by the University of Texas, and I forget the professor's name. And we've gone through a few iterations of how to calculate and use the palm method. And IBWC and Dr. Borra and Delbert have plenty of experience on using the palm method. And the palm method, of course, will help regulate, attenuate the flows instead of them just coming rapidly down the river and into Presidio.
Is that something, Gabe, that you're able to provide, or that USIBWC can provide a document that kind of describes that method or lays it out exactly what it is?
Yeah, no, the USIBWC has all the documentation on how the palm method was developed, who developed it, and how to implement it. And is that something that I was just going to ask Delbert? Is that something that you all could provide us as an action item?
Yeah, I'll write it down to make sure there's no issues with sharing it. We also have our internal float ops criteria and manual dictates how we do the reservoirs and apply the method during an event. And let me write this down, and I'll follow up with you after the meeting. I think I could add also, I don't want to detract from the agenda too much, but some context on Presidio. One of the issues that Mexico had to open up the releases like that is because they didn't maintain adequate flood capacity in their reservoirs when the storms hit.
I see.
That caused.
Right. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about specific strategies related to the Rio Grande and communication between the different entities at a separate subcommittee meeting. Probably one of those where we'll focus on Rio Grande the whole time. For the purposes of this call, since we have got a lot to get through, I'll just open it up one more time to, does anyone else feel strongly that the 500-year event should be considered in Presidio? Okay. Well, I think with what Gabe mentioned about this palm strategy and also the potential, it sounds like from Gabe's perspective, coincident flooding is not likely, but it is a unique situation there. Does anybody feel strongly that there should be a coincidence analysis or an FME of a coincidence analysis for the two rivers and Presidio?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody disagree that we shouldn't propose a study of the coincidence analysis? Okay.
Can you also just look at the 100-year, but analyze for the 500 to see how high the water level gets on bridges or culverts, etc. Maybe that'll be a good one.
Yeah, like I said, we will have the 500-year map as part of our existing flood risk analysis, and yeah, that's a good point. We can look at bridges and culverts and probably be based on rough fathom floodplains, but that's something that we can make a note of.
There were recent improvements by TxDOT on the Port of Entry Bridge and also the rail bridge. And I remember reading flood capacity in those documents. I can't recall what it was, but it was definitely much greater than 25-year. So TxDOT might have already done some of the analysis on the Port of Entry site for you all.
Okay, you said the Port of Entry bridge and the rail bridge?
Yeah, they're brand new, renovated. Literally last year they were done. The improvements were done. And so they're like really sturdy and definitely much better than some of the other infrastructure that's around. I just can't recall the flood risk. I'm sorry, the construction level.
That's very good information. Thank you for letting us know that. Do we actually have anyone from TxDOT on the call? I know I reached out to some of them earlier last week, and maybe it was this week, and invited them. So I wasn't sure if anyone joined us from TxDOT today. Okay, well, we'll reach out to them, and yeah, this is the kind of feedback we want to hear. If you all know about projects like that in the area, please continue to speak up, and yeah, if you don't feel comfortable yes, please.
Chris, yeah, this is Apurva again from USIBWC. Yeah, those bridges were actually designed for 100-year flow, and they have to show to USIBWC, both actually IBWC, both section, no, US as well as Mexican section, that they are not raising the water level or they are not deflecting water towards either to Mexico or to US. So actually they are protected for 100 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So TxDOT coordinated with USIBWC in that design?
Yes.
Have they coordinated with the Mexican side, Chris? I mean, I asked that to Dr. Bora. Have they coordinated with the Mexican side? If their levees are only considering 25 years, there will always be shorter on their side.
No, I think it's all the way through. No, I think you are talking about old bridge, but the new, I think recently built, those are for 100 years. Yeah.
So, Dr. Bora, do you think that? Well, I guess I'll ask this of the TxDOT folks when we request, any plans or studies. But if there is a process that was documented on how TxDOT coordinated with USIBWC for that type of project, it would be really good to nail down, well, what was that process? They designed it, they went to USIBWC, USIBWC reviewed it, or they coordinated with Mexico, Mexico reviewed it. Anything we can do to define what that process looks like for a project along the levee would be very helpful for this study. Are you able to maybe send us any documentation about what that process looked like?
Yes, actually, anytime there is any project on the border, depending on the proponent, if it's from US side or Mexican side, and then they will submit to that section, This TxDOT actually submitted to USIBWC all their design documents as well as hydraulic models. So we reviewed it and then we shared with Mexican section.
Okay.
And if the proponent from Mexican section, actually they get the documents, then they review it and they share the documents with their review comments, or if they have any objections. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it would be helpful to get a copy of I guess the types of what submittal that was. Maybe you're not able to share that, and I understand that, but just the components, like here's what we needed to see, here's what was reviewed, and here's who shared it. USIBWC dealt with this person in the Mexico IBWC, and what was that person's title? Is that something you could provide in maybe an email, just kind of outlining that general process, and then we can ask some questions if we need more detail, but we can start kind of general.
Yes, I can provide that. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, I think we have, for time purposes, we're running a little bit behind already, but this is a very good discussion. We do want to encourage you all to continue to share these ideas and these thoughts. The next agenda or the next item here, I want to mention future condition analysis. That's something that we don't have any real data that I'm aware of for future impervious in most of the region. There is some future condition land use in El Paso, the city limits, I believe, but not throughout the entire county, is my understanding. So we weren't planning on using future condition or future climate. I know that when we looked at some climate studies, it was very variable across the region, most of the region. El Paso had a little bit of consistency where you might be able to make some assumptions for future climate changes in El Paso, but does anybody feel that we should focus on future floodplains, future 100-unit floodplains when we're looking at projects and design for future impervious or future climate change anywhere specifically in the region?
I do want to provide in El Paso County, outside of the incorporated limits of the city of El Paso, the county is working hard on building infrastructure, but we at the irrigation district are seeing increased flows coming from the northern side of the county down into the lower valley. This does have a direct impact on Socorro, San Elizario, and Clint. It goes beyond what normal subdivision development plans for. So they set up their ponding, and then they claim that they're going to capture all the water that their impervious structures are going to generate. But no matter what enforcement, what guidance the county gives them, we're still seeing increased flows and an increased amount of arroyos. So it is our due diligence, I think, to at least take a second look at that area. And I'm talking specifically on the lower valley. The future conditions, we know that the areas around Horizon are going to keep being developed. You can see it even on Google Maps. You can see how the people landowners are already dividing up that plot, all of that land. And then we at the irrigation district get permits for subdivisions for additional growth. So this is a problem that at least at this time, we have an opportunity to get a second look. I don't know at what extent we're able to estimate future conditions, but I do think it does warrant some sort of specialized study, or at least a strategy, so we can access additional funding from the Texas Water Development Board to do something more comprehensive. But we need to bring it to the attention.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments on that area or any other parts of the region where they think future conditions, either future impervious or future climate studies, should be considered when designing FMSs or FME, or looking at studies like FMEs?
I know I'm not on the committee. Hi, I'm Joanna with Hudson County, but we are seeing a lot of growth, particularly in Fort Hancock and right outside of Horizon City as well. We have a lot of illegal subdivisions we're dealing with. And while the population is in tens of thousands, it is turning into thousands of people. So just a consideration. I don't know if it's, probably what this time, but to have in the back of your minds would really be helpful.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. All right, that's very helpful as well. I'll just pause there and ask, could both of you, Omar and Joanna, please provide, just as a follow-up action item, a rough map of the general area that you all are concerned about and would like to consider future land use? I know you've described it here, but it'd be great to just get something in an email. It could just be a Google Maps screenshot and just a circle, something real rough. But is that something you could follow up and provide to us?
Yes, and Ms. McKenzie, I can also help you explore those issues at Hudson County and then provide that email to AECOM.
Thank you, and I know we've got a meeting next week as well, so we can can combine those efforts. Thank you very much.
Great. Anybody else have any areas or that they want to bring up, or if they have any comments on the two areas that were mentioned?
I mean, I do.
Chris,
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I do concur with Omar about the area of Socorro and the growth in Horizon City. It's been very rapid and fast, and it all concentrates coming across the freeway in a small area that has to go through culverts, and it gets concentrated coming down to Socorro in that area. And yeah, it's been a problem. So I do agree with you, Omar, on that.
And the way I spoke to Dr. Blair about this yesterday, and the way it seems to work out is that while every subdivision that gets developed is planning for their own stormwater management, it seems like nobody's taking a bigger look. And each engineer is focused on their little plot of land, but nobody's getting that comprehensive look. And when you add a 1 + 1, sometimes it's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's sort of the effect that we're seeing, even as new development claims that they're controlling stormwater flows. It's not really happening. We're seeing increased, and it's beyond the problem of just illegal subdivisions. It's legal subdivisions that are still returning with more than expected flows. So I don't know what.
And a lot of it, Omar, is probably because it's hilly and it has steep slopes on the road. Even though they might design the proper size ponding, but the water is not ending up in the pond, is just continuing the roads and going downhill. A lot of it is how to catch it and get it in the pond, and then it gets silted out, and all these inlets gets closed after a year, no maintenance, so the water gets bypassed and ends up at the freeway. I do notice that in a lot of areas, Omar. Yes, I agree with you on that.
You've explained it much better than I can. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we also see that here in El Paso, I mean, especially in the mountainous areas. A lot of the times the developers are claiming, or the engineers are claiming, they're releasing less runoff. They're doing us a favor by developing, pretty much. Which, so yeah, that's something very important, because it does increase the velocities and the flows, and then it affects the roads, existing infrastructure, emergency, first responders, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something very important to look at.
Isela, the city is going through the revision of the DDMs, and so far in all these years, they have very limited choices on what kind of inlets we use on the interception of the water. Maybe we could introduce different kind of inlets that would deal with steeper slopes. Like I've seen them, like they incorporate some type of fins to catch or capture, or a bigger method of doing it. So that may be something we could consider.
Definitely, yeah. We need to look into that, because I know they're also looking at the design standards for construction, and they're working on that. So that's where these inlets would go.
That would be good to consider. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
So just to clarify, Sal, you're saying the city, is that the city of Horizon City? They're revising their DDM currently?
City of El Paso.
Oh, City of El Paso. Okay.
We have the same issues in El Paso on the mountainous areas, where lots of the waters will bypass the inlets.
Okay. Well, does anybody disagree that maybe that's a potential FMS, where we look at the types of inlets that the revised DDM should require? Does anyone else have any comments on that, or does anyone disagree, or should we say that should be an FMS? Sounds like an FMS to me. It sounds like a strategy versus a study, but maybe Brian, feel free to jump in if you think it's more of like, or anybody, but I know Brian and I have been talking a lot about, well, is this a strategy or a study? But to me, it seems like a strategy. Anyone else have any thoughts about this subject? Okay.
I agree. That sounds
Dr.
like a
Bora?
good strategy.
All right, thank you for bringing that up. Dr. Bora, I think were you going to say something a little while ago?
Yes. I have a question regarding this region map. So does it end in Presidio, or it go all the way to the Presidio County, end at like Lajitas?
I'm sorry, what does what end at Lajitas?
The region, if I may, the region ends in an Amistad Reservoir. It's from El Paso County all the way to Amistad Reservoir. Yes.
Okay, then it covers actually that area. So there are a lot of creeks downstream from Presidio. So they bring actually a lot of sediments like Alamito Creek, and also there's another called Terneros. And we don't have any control doing this, building any sediment basin or anything. We can only remove those sediments from the mouth at the river. But it brings a lot of sediments, and that makes a bottleneck for flow in the Rio Grande. So I don't know if part of the flood control you guys can do that kind of like building sediment basin upstream in inland areas.
Yeah, I think that's the subject we're going to talk about here very, very shortly. But that's a good point, and I'll ask. Sorry to keep assigning people tasks, but it's going to help. It's going to make it a lot easier for us if we can ask that you follow up as an action item, Dr. Bora, and maybe just on a map show us those two, or if there's more than two, the areas that you're talking about where sediment is being brought into the Rio Grande, so that will give us some specific tribs that we can focus on. Is that something we can ask that you provide after the meeting?
Yes, I'll ask the field office to provide those information. Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm just making a quick note. So for the interest of time, I'm gonna try to fly through these next few slides fairly quickly. But again, if anybody has any, thoughts or feel very strongly about any of these subjects, please feel free to interrupt. We want to hear you, but like I said, we've got a lot to cover today, and we really want to hear from some of our guests that aren't able to attend, most of the meetings. Like I said, we're going to focus on 2006 and 2021 flooding events, so we want to make sure to get to that. But thank you, everyone. I'll just wrap this slide up with if we don't, other methods that we can use to identify significant populations at risk or critical facilities where we don't have, FEMA floodplain mapping. Big resources is the stakeholder survey that we sent out to all the communities. So if they tell us in there that they have issues, that brings it to our attention. Historical news. If we know that they had flooding, even if they don't have any maps, but we know that it's been in the news, people have died, there's been coverage of that. That's another way to bring it to our attention. Okay, we might need a study in this area to focus on what caused that flooding. Another resource is gauge data. If there's a USGS gauge or even just rainfall data, we know that we got significant storms. That helps us identify these areas. And also, if there are any flood studies, for example, if the city, if Presidio has like a master plan, or any of these cities have, in Pecos County, might have a master plan or some stormwater projects in their list of CIPs, then we might know that they have an issue. So that's a reason why we asked for that in the stakeholder survey. That was a question we asked. So that is the approach we're kind of looking at for FMEs in areas that don't have significant flooding. So during to develop FMSs, it's kind of a similar process, but we have some detailed floodplain maps. Because we can't do an FMS or an FMP if we don't have sufficient H&H data to identify the flood risk and quantify the flood risk. That's a big part of developing an FMS or an FMP. That isn't required for an FME or a study. So the first part is what we're doing today. We're understanding what are the most important issues in the region when you're developing an FMS. And then part of the process to screen out the FMSs that we want to study is you start out with stakeholder coordination, exactly what we're doing. The stakeholder survey, that's how we got some of you all into the meeting today, as you may have found out about us through the stakeholder survey and provided some helpful information. And so we reached out and invited you all. You might be from subcommittee members participating here today. Flood studies, like I mentioned, master plan, CIP list, that's another way to identify FMSs. A lot of these have cost-benefit analyses. We can take advantage of those cost-benefit analyses. Maybe they've already ranked the projects in their cities or their regions in these stormwater plans. Like we know the city of El Paso and the county of El Paso have ranked their projects according to their cost-benefit analyses. We can compare some of the criteria that were analyzed in those master plans to the TWDB scoring criteria, which is available in the guidance that TWDB provides. We can see if there's best available maps to example, if they have Zone A or Zone AE floodplains available, we can use those floodplains to see, okay, how many houses are at risk. We know that the preliminary FEMA maps in El Paso have detailed depth grids, so we can actually see how high the flooding occurs in these groups of structures. And we also have models that are maintained sometimes by federal, state, or municipal agencies that aren't the official FEMA models, but they might keep track of all the recent developments that maybe aren't considered in all the FEMA models. So those are just some sources. And of course, if there's LIDAR, that's a big help. That can really improve the accuracy of the topography and the models. We want to identify the largest critical groups of resources within the 100-year floodplain. And maybe we want to look at depth as well, but that's something that we'll consider when developing these FMSs. Are there big groups? And which flood events, do we consider for these areas? Again, it sounds like we'll focus on the 100-year, but we might, when we're developing cost-benefit analysis, it could be beneficial to consider the 10, the 25, the 50, the 100. And that's something that was in one of the questions we asked Texas Water Development Board to provide some feedback on. So we can get back to that issue a little bit later once we hear back from TWDB. And again, I think we already talked about the future conditions, and we're going to get some more information from Omar and Joanna about the Horizon City area. And then we'll look into the different types of inlets in the City of El Paso DDM revisions to consider, some of the issues that they're having with development and some of the regulations there. Also, if there's land available for certain types of flood improvements, once we look at all the data, we identify the risk, we see where the groups of houses or buildings or roads are located, then we want to say, okay, well, what kind of solution is needed? And if that solution is a sediment basin that requires a certain amount of land, we want to look around the area upstream and see, for example, City of El Paso, there's a lot of areas where it's just land is not available for the type of improvements that might be needed. So that is an issue to consider. Is land available? Any other constraints or resources that anyone wants to bring up when we're looking at FMSs, which again are areas that have detailed models available, and we're trying to come up with strategies or projects even. Any other important constraints we should consider?
This is Delbert from IBWC. Dr. Boy already mentioned it, and I'll mention it again, that there could be issues with the treaties we have with Mexico, depending on what strategy you want to implement. So,
thank you. Yep, that's a good point.
Following up on that point, Chris, is if we do have constraints on how to deal with the Mexican side and not being able to model in a certain way to affect Mexico or to see that we are diverting flow to them, how is that going to affect our model on our side? Like, if it's always going to, if we go for a higher standards, it'll always flood on the Mexican side and not affect the U.S. side. How do we make that assumption?
Right, and that's in the detailed list of questions that we sent to TWDB. So we'll have to revisit that subject once we hear back from them.
Okay.
I don't know if yeah, that was sent to TWDB. So we'll just revisit that when we hear back. We'll have a separate meeting concerning those answers.
I mean, we could ask that question, Gabe, if he's still on. In 2006, when we had that big flood, I believe, I'm not sure, my memory doesn't serve, but I think he would probably remember better if it breached the levee on the Mexican side, and that's why on the US side, we didn't see anything. Could you confirm that, Gabe?
Yeah, I don't recall any breaches on the, okay, we're talking just about the El Paso area, is that correct?
I'm saying, did it breach the levee on the Mexican side during that storm?
In the El Paso area.
In the El Paso area, indeed.
Yeah, it did, down at the Acequia Madre, 2006, the Arroyo Víboras, the snake Arroyo Víboras in Mexico, comes out of the Juarez Mountains, and Mexico had built some retaining dams in those mountains, which is the Juarez Mountains just south of El Paso. And a huge amount of flow was stored behind one of these retaining basins in the Arroyo Víboras. And Mexico had to build a bypass and pump over the structure because it could have failed or was about to fail. The water was within 6 inches of overtopping. We're talking 2006. I witnessed this myself. They had set up some siphon pumps, which is just a long siphon over the dam to prevent it from collapsing. And there was such an amount of water that it would have overtopped the levees in the US and in Mexico and flood out a good portion of downtown. There was a lot of media coverage on this at the time. With that, a whole bunch of sediment also came down the Rio Grande beyond passing American Dam and completely plugging up the Arroyo Víboras. And if you want, I have some coordinates that I wrote down in anticipation of this call. So if anybody's interested, you can look up where the Acequia Madre is at these coordinates: 31 degrees, 45.648 minutes, by 106 degrees, 30.597 minutes was one area where the levee was breached. And then upstream at Monument Number 1, the flooding pushed water all the way up into Mexico, all the way up to the monument itself. So there was a lot of flooding there. If we're talking about 2006, the Escarate Arroyo, let me say the Escarate Wasteway at 31 degrees, 44 minutes, 31 degrees, 44.703 minutes, by 106, 24.215 minutes. That structure, the gates on the structure were so poorly maintained over all these years that IBWC contracted with the district to remove the old gates and improve the new ones. But what you had was backflow from the Rio Grande up into the Escarate area from there. And there were also two other structures that pretty much failed during 2006 in the lower part of the rectification project. And one of them was the county lines structure, and I can't remember the other one. But those structures in an emergency basin, they were just plugged up with rocks and stones by the district to prevent flooding of the agricultural land on the U.S. side.
And if I may add real quick, and I apologize for interrupting, these structures, I spoke to them about them with Dr. Blair. We've identified 5 structures, and 2 of the ones you already mentioned are included in them, and I'll send them by email. So we have the same, pretty much the same message to convey that there's a certain structures that failed and how they failed. We have information on that.
Good. There was also at Yarborough, the Yarborough Bridge, the levee came within sorry, the flooding came within maybe 4 or 5 inches of overtopping the levees there.
On the U.S. side?
Yes, on the U.S. side. And let me give you the coordinates. No, I didn't write that down for the coordinates for that one. In the Chamizal at the time, there was like at least 10 foot of silt in the bottom of the channel there that prevented the flow from actually flowing out of the Chamizal. And although that structure is designed for 23,000 CFS, I believe, the levees just above the Chamizal came within 1 foot of overtopping the levees there, 2006. Basically due to poor maintenance of the channel because there was so much debris or silt inside the channel, and all kinds of plants grew in there, willows and all kinds of plants that just kind of bound all that all that silt material into place and then didn't allow the flood to pass efficiently. There was a lot of flooding on the Mexican side at the Anapra area. In the Anapra area, a culvert that passes underneath the railroad had become plugged. And during that event, the water actually backed up into Mexico and it flooded about 60 homes in Mexico. There were also two excavators, backhoe excavators, large ones that were stuck inside the flooding because as Mexico tried to relieve the pressure going underneath the fence, those two excavators got stuck there. And there were other events that I can't recall right now without looking at some more notes that happened during 2006. We had an engineer at American Dam, Cesar Bolsier, who took high water marks, and those are in the files at IBWC. So of 2006, those are the main points that I remember.
Thank you, Gabe. Yeah, we appreciate you sharing that and being here today, of course. Again, Dr. Bora and Delbert, these high water marks that were mentioned at the Cesar Bolsier, is that something that you all might be able to provide?
I don't know if it's the same list of high water marks, but I do have a list of high water marks, elevations, and coordinates, and I don't see why we would not be able to provide them.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, well, thank you for sharing that. I think we've kind of jumped into the topic of the 2006 and other storm events and what were observed there. We had a few slides here that we were going to talk about EPC WRD1 issues, and then we're going to talk about some issues that Jeff Bennett brought up concerning environmental flows and ASR. But Dr. Blair, he couldn't make it today. He was one of the stakeholders with EPC WRD who helped us identify these issues. Jeff Bennett, he couldn't make it today, and he was the one who helped us identify these issues. For the interest of time, I'd like to go ahead and just jump into this last. So we can cover those in a later meeting. Those won't be forgotten. But just since I know we have some special guests here today, we want to make sure and give them a chance to speak with us. So I'll just jump back into this last part of the presentation where, well, second to last, we still need to talk about future tentative meeting dates, but we've already established when the next meeting is going to be. It's November 10th. So I don't think we need to spend too much time on this slide. The rest of the meeting, I'd like to focus on the 2006, the 2008 flooding in Presidio and Ojinaga and El Paso in 2021. And if there's any other flood events, I know Delbert had mentioned, I think he said it was 2007 there was a levee breach. Is that right, Delbert?
I was talking about the 2008 event in Presidio.
Oh,
You know,
okay, that
email
was that
we
same
had back
event.
and forth. Yes.
Right. Okay.
When's the next meeting, Chris? When did you say the next meeting was?
November 10th. And something to keep in mind is that meeting is, we're going to have to discuss the process. We have an internal deadline of to get the task, posting the goals for task 3 and task in the process for task 4, which is again, how are we identifying these FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs? So that'll be a big topic on the next meeting is agreeing on the details of what that process looks like so that we can post it on November 15th, which will be 15 days before our general planning group meeting on November 30th. So just keep that in mind. I know that we wanted to get through a lot more today about these flood events, but we'll have those conversations. We just might not have them at the next meeting, but you know, maybe that next meeting needs to be a lot longer. It sounds like you know, there's a lot that needs to be said, and we want to hear you all. But for now, we want to try to keep you all in time as much as we can. I think Gonzalo is here today, right? Were you able to join us, Gonzalo?
Yeah, he's on the call.
Yes, I am here. I'm listening.
Hey, Gonzalo. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Jeff,
good to hear you again.
Jeff, you hear me?
Hi,
Yes.
Gonzalo.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see you all. And I'm glad to
Same
see
here.
we share the same problems. And for some reason, water always finds a way to embarrass us. But anyway, I'm here. Anything that you want to, you know, I guess from 2006, you know, by all means, I'm here to help out.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I was going to hand this part over to Jeff actually and let him ask a few questions. And we have some folks taking notes as well and trying to keep track. And you know, we'll go to the end of the meeting. At least we've got about 15, 20 minutes left. And we'll just try to get as much information as we can in that time. And we might sort of have a part 2 to this, you know, following up later. But Jeff, you want to go ahead and ask the questions to Gonzalo, and then I think Enrique from the city of El Paso or EP Water was going to be speaking as well. We also spoke a little bit with Kareem, so from the city of El Paso, and yeah, like I said, I wish we had a little bit more time, but go ahead, Jeff.
So I don't think we really have time to go into this in this particular meeting. We're supposed to end in 15 minutes. So I think what we're going to do now is I just want to make sure, I want to thank the people that showed up that I was going to have talk about their experiences during these floods and just see if they can make it on the 10th. Gonzalo, you think you can make it on the 10th?
Oh, yeah, I'll be here.
And John Gwynn from EBID, you think you can make it on the 10th? Or Joanna?
John Gwynn, he's joining us from Doña Ana County, or he was going to try. I don't know if he made it on here today.
He's on. I mean, John Gwynn from Doña Ana County. So Joanna, you're from Hudson County, right?
Yes, sir, and I'll definitely be at that meeting.
Yeah, and Delbert, are you going to be able to make it again with your staff on the 10th?
It's on my calendar right now, so I'm planning 10 a.m.
Yeah. So
yeah, we might try to do 3 hours on that call. I think if we want to go through these questions and also hit the main points that we need to hit before the deadline that I discussed, we might extend it at least, I think, to 2 hours and maybe just block out a 3 hour time block, and people could stay on.
We're gonna need 3 hours. So the basic idea of this is we were going to go through and we were going to have under this agenda item, we're going to have people share their experiences and just talk about what happened in each of the floods from their perspective. And we have lots of folks from El Paso, and we have Gabe Duran. Gabe, are you going to be available on the 10th?
Yes, I'll be there.
And we'll just basically go through people that have experiences around the region, and we'll pick their brains on what actually happened during the event. And then after we get that list of what happened and their experiences, then we'll go through and people relate their experiences. And then afterwards, in front of the full committee, we'll say, all right, given this experience, what need is demonstrated by this, and have everybody else chime in, and we'll make a list of needs based upon what was related about the flood. Because I think we've had recent floods that have been pretty stressing the system pretty bad in this region. So we would get this list of needs, and then we'd have one more pass through where we come up with either studies or strategies to address those needs. So for instance, if you had sediment coming down out of the Franklin Mountains and plugging up culverts, then the need would be to prevent sediment from coming down from the mountains, and the strategy would be to develop a strategy to reduce the sediment production coming out of the mountains. So I think it'll be a fairly straightforward process to go into potential FMEs and FMSs after people talk, and we'll have everybody educated on the call so that we can understand what the issues were before we start talking about what exactly we're going to do. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Chris, who can pass it back to Annette, and we're just going to put off this discussion until the 10th. But we're going to need a lot of time on the 10th.
So we have a board meeting on the 10th, so I'll probably be joining you guys late, but Gonzalo will be on the call, Enrique will be on the call. Hopefully Corinne makes it as well, so I think we'll be covered on our end.
Okay. All right, thanks, Jeff. I do want to use the remaining time we have to just hear a little bit of Gonzalo's experiences in 2006. Did Alan Schubert, was he able to join us as well?
No, he's not on the call.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So I just wanted to ask Gonzalo. I don't know, Jeff. Do you want to ask the questions, like kind of what we're going to go through on the next meeting with Gonzalo, just to give everyone sort of a example of how we're gonna ask these same questions to EP Water and City of El Paso, and so I think it'd be good to just kind of run through those questions one time with Gonzalo.
I don't think we have time to have Gonzalo answer the questions, but I'll read what the basic questions are that we're going to be discussing next time. So,
okay. Do you want to share your screen at all, Jeff, and just show them so they can see the questions as well?
So the questions, we're not going to go through these questions one by one and have people answer them. That's not the way we're going to conduct this. These are just things to get your brain's juices going. So I'm going to ask people to give their experiences in the flood, whatever they think is relevant to this discussion. But we're looking for what actually happened in the flood rather than what the solutions are. The solutions is the second part of this. So in terms of describing it, the type of stuff that I'm looking for in the descriptions is what drainage structure was overtopped or was taken to full capacity with the different types of infrastructure that applies to.
Jeff,
Where-
can you just zoom in a little bit? Sorry to interrupt, but it's kind of hard to see your screen.
Was sediment transport into the infrastructure a major factor in the flood event for these structures, and where did it happen within the region? What were the major public concerns about the flood impacts? What actually happened and what the public was concerned about may or may not be the same. What happened at the river outlets and pump stations? What happened at the canals and the drains in the Rio Grande terrain, floodplain? What are the major post-flood maintenance repair activities? Were any particular designs affected more than others? What was the lead time on notice of a potential flood event? What could have been done with more lead time? Were emergency routes critical infrastructure affected? What agencies were involved in flood response? Were there emergency needs for materials or equipment that were not met quickly? And are there opportunities for improved agency coordination? We're not going to go through these things one by one, but these are just food for thought for when we have the discussion on the 10th. Back to you, Chris.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks, Jeff. Go ahead and share my screen again. So with that, I'll just talk one more time about the tentative future meeting dates. We do, as I mentioned, need to vote on this process for identifying and screening the FMEs and FMSs that will be evaluated in detail as part of the regional flood plan. We will have to also do the same identifying of the process for FMPs, which again, we have a separate subcommittee focused on the flood mitigation projects. But that is something that we need to get done by the 15th so we can post that. So we'll talk about that, and we'll start out the next meeting doing this exercise so we know that we get through it all, and then we'll save that process towards the end. Other important dates coming up, we've got the El Paso open house on Wednesday, the 27th. It's our roadshow meeting. That's going to be at the Tech H2O Center off Montana in El Paso from 4 to 7 p.m. We'll have some display poster boards up. I'll be there in person. Gilbert Andujo will be there. Alejandra, or I'm not sure if Alejandra is going to make it, but we'll have about five or six AECOM staff there. You know, we hope to see you all. Barracuda, one of our sub-consultants, will be there as well. And you know, we encourage all of y'all to stop by. We'd really like to see your faces in person, or at least behind a mask is okay too. But it would be great just to get input from you all, and that's a really good opportunity to invite others to learn about this important plan. We'll have some large maps, roll plots set up where the public can come in and circle locations where they might have flooding issues that they know about. And so please do stop by and spread the word. If there's anyone we may have missed or may not have heard, you know, we've done a lot of advertising, but we obviously can't get it out there to everyone. So please spread the word. We also have the next general planning meeting on the 2nd of November coming up. We have already discussed that internal deadline. Then after that, 11:30 on the November 30th is when we're going to vote on the processes that we present on November 15th and November 16th. So hopefully we get that voted before we turn in our tech memo, which is due the draft on December 3rd. We're trying to get that vote in before we submit our tech memo. So any questions about November 10th? Like I said, this will probably be a 3-hour meeting, so please try to plan that. We'll update the meeting invites, you know, later today. Gilbert, can you send that out later today after this meeting, the invite for the 10th, and just make it 3 hours?
Gilbert's not on the call, Chris. You're going to have to do it.
Okay, well, I'll coordinate with him after this. But yeah, thank you all again for joining us. Sorry we didn't quite have enough time to get through the full agenda that we wanted to today, but you know, it's part of the process. We got to hear from you all, and you were able to share some ideas, and that's what we're here for. So, you know, we didn't get through our agenda, but we got through what we're trying to do here, which is hear from you all, and we got some very good action items and some good follow-up. So, you know, I'm very happy about that, and thank you again. We really appreciate all the interaction and the discussion here today. So, any last
Chris.
thoughts or questions? Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you want to share the questionnaire, well, at least with me, so I can prepare, so it doesn't, you know, we can make it condensed and more precise in my narrative to the response, so, you know, we can have more effective meeting, please.
That's a good idea.
So I can have
send that out.
Reactive response that I think I wanna cover. I guess I just basically want to cover the scenario and what was the people who were in charge and what happened and how did it hit us, and you know, and how we reacted and so forth. So and so to be more of a constructive learning experience more than a finger pointing.
Yeah, I agree. That's what we're after. We want to find out, how do we learn from what happened, and what kind of strategies or studies do we need to put in place to make the process and the communication as effective as possible moving forward.
Very well. Thank you.
So yeah, we'll send out some instructions. You all will be a little bit more prepared, and try to lay it out exactly how we're going to go through the process. And I think that'll be helpful for everyone. But thank you. Thanks again for being here. Any other last comments?
It's back to,
Thank you, Chris.
it's back to Annette.
Maybe you should share that those questionnaire with everybody's on this meeting, to give also people from the IBWC to have their input also in order.
Yeah, we'll make it part of the official meeting materials that get sent out, and you know, hopefully even before we send out the meeting materials, we can send out these questions, because the meeting materials need to be posted 3 days prior. The agenda will be posted a week prior, but we'll try to get you these questions, you know, as soon as we can get them to you. So probably even sometime next week.
Good. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. We still have item number 4 that we've kind of put behind, but I may suggest that we could table it, and we get both minutes, the minutes from September 30th and the minute from this meeting, both approved at the November 10th meeting. And I would entertain a motion if you all in agreement.
Isela, do you want to make a motion to table agenda item 4?
Yes, I make the motion to table it.
Second, Omar.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to table item 4 and a second. Is anybody in opposition with this? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, Isela. Thank you.
You can adjourn.
Okay, so now I guess we don't have to take a vote, but we could adjourn. Thank you, guys. Thank you for attending our meeting.
Thank you all. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Your motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Bye.
Motion and a second.
Aye.
Everybody in agreement, say aye.
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 Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks
Yeah.
all.
Great effort.
Bye.
Thank you.